when every brand looks AI-generated. The coming crisis of visual sameness. Welcome to the Threads of Culture, a show that unpacks design, branding, and the cultural forces shaping the global stage. Today, we're diving into what happens when every company on Earth starts designing with the same brain. Here's the most dangerous thing about AI design tools. It's not that they produce bad work, it's that they produce the same work. Why does every AI-generated brand feel polished but hollow, like a confident person saying absolutely nothing? This isn't a design problem. This is a survival problem. In a world flooded with visual competence, the brands that can't prove they're different won't just fade into the background. They'll become the background. Here's where we're going. First, we'll trace the pattern that repeats every time a new design tool reshapes culture, from the printing press to Instagram filters. Then, we'll follow the money and look at how AI sameness is already showing up in real brands, real campaigns, and real backlash. And finally, we'll look at who's designing against the algorithm and what that tells us about where visual identity is heading. Every major design tool in history has left a fingerprint on the era that adopted it. Not because the tools forced a style, but because they made one style easier than all the others. When Gutenberg built his press, black-letter typefaces became the default. Not because they were beautiful or ideal for reading, because they were what the movable type could reliably reproduce. It took decades for Roman letter forms to emerge as an alternative. The tool chose the aesthetic before the designer could. Now speed that cycle up. Photoshop arrives in the 90s, and suddenly every website has lens flares, drop shadows, and glossy buttons. Not because designers collectively decided that was the look, because those were the most impressive things the software made easy. The entire Web 2.0 era was Photoshop's default capabilities dressed up as a cultural moment. Then Instagram launches with a set of filters. And within 2 years, an entire generation of photography looks like it was shot through the same amber window. Valencia, Nashville, lo-fi. These weren't aesthetic movements born from artistic intention. They were drop-down menu options that shipped with the app. Canva shows up in the mid-2010s, and suddenly anyone with a laptop could produce a passable flyer, social post, or pitch deck. The catch? Template-driven design made everything look like a slightly rearranged version of someone else's layout. The Canva aesthetic became instantly recognizable, and quietly, nobody wanted to be associated with it. But here's the thing. Before AI entered the conversation, the design world was already deep in a sameness crisis. Fons Mons wrote a piece called "We Made Design Efficient and Killed the Magic," and his argument was sharp. Apple's design leadership set a standard. Dribbble gave designers a stage to perform polish for other designers. Startups realized that design mattered, but the way they adopted it, through shared platforms and trending styles, produced a generation of apps and products that were visually interchangeable. Scroll through Dribbble's popular page from 2018 and you'll see it. Soft gradients, floating UI cards, friendly illustrations with the same proportions, the same rounded corners, the same careful emptiness. AI didn't create the convergence problem. AI inherited it. And then it put the whole thing on fast forward. Here's the structural issue. When a brand tells an AI tool it wants something clean, modern, and tech-forward, the AI doesn't look at that brand's history, its competitive landscape, or the culture it's trying to speak to. It looks at the statistical average of everything in its training data, labeled clean, modern, and tech-forward. The result is predictable, not because AI is stupid, because averaging is literally what it does. Same tools, similar prompts, converging output. This is not a user error. It's the architecture of the technology expressing itself. Look at fintech. Line up 20 fintech logos from the last 2 years, and the pattern is almost eerie. Geometric sans serif word marks, gradient color palettes running from blue to purple or teal to green, abstract node and connection imagery suggesting networks, flow, trust. None of these companies copied each other. They didn't need to. They were all drinking from the same well. The Design Research Society has a phrase for this kind of output: Visually competent but conceptually hollow. It looks like it means something without meaning anything specific. Now consider Marvel's Secret Invasion. Method Studios used AI to generate the opening title sequence for the Disney Plus show, and there was actually a clever rationale behind it. The show is about shapeshifters, so the morphing, unstable quality of AI-generated imagery fit the theme. On paper, smart. In practice, the backlash was immediate and fierce. Artists saw it as a signal that studios would replace human labor with algorithms. Audiences sensed something was off, not because the visuals were ugly, but because they felt generic in a way that was hard to articulate. The work was competent, the meaning was missing, and the audience could tell. This is the part that should worry every brand strategist alive right now. Forbes recently reframed the role of brand identity not as a differentiator, but as a survival strategy. In a world where AI can generate a professional-looking brand package in minutes, the definition of professional has essentially collapsed. Looking good is no longer a competitive advantage. It's table stakes. And when table stakes are free, the only thing left to compete on is specificity. Cultural specificity. Emotional specificity. The kind of meaning that only comes from having a real point of view. So who's getting this right? The brands winning the sameness war are the ones that look like no algorithm would ever produce them. Liquid Death sells water. Canned water. And its branding looks like it was ripped off a thrash metal album cover. Hand-drawn skulls. Aggressive typography. A tone of voice that swings between absurd and confrontational. No AI default would ever land there. That's the point. Duolingo turned a language learning app into one of the most unhinged brand presences on the internet, leaning into meme culture, chaos, and a green owl with an unsettling amount of personality. These brands don't resist AI because they're anti-technology. They resist the average. They design against the grain of their tools rather than along it. And this is where things get interesting looking forward. AI tools are improving fast. Companies can now fine-tune models on proprietary brand assets, theoretically producing outputs that are both machine-generated and brand-consistent. But that option is expensive. It requires a deep library of existing visual work to train on, which means it's available to Nike and not available to the startup that launched last month. The gap between brands with the resources to make AI distinctive and brands stuck with the defaults is going to widen. Visual culture is splitting into two tiers. Bespoke sameness for those who can afford to train their own models, and generic sameness for everyone else. Meanwhile, the cultural weight of visual symbols keeps getting flattened. Research on visual communication shows that images, colors, and symbols carry vastly different meanings across contexts. A green palette signals sustainability in one market and water waste in another. AI doesn't navigate these tensions, it averages them out. And as brands expand globally, leaning on AI-generated visuals that compress cultural nuance into statistical midpoints, the risk isn't just that brands look the same. It's that they stop saying anything at all. So when every brand looks AI-generated, what does it actually mean to look like something? Maybe the answer isn't about the tools at all. Maybe it's about whether you have something specific enough to say that no tool could say it for you. Think about the last brand that made you stop scrolling. Ask yourself whether a human made that decision or a statistical average did. You probably already know. The interesting question is whether it matters to you. Share it with the founder who just asked an AI to make their logo. Until next time, this has been The Threads of Culture.